Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app, AUDACY.
You might be a tailgater.
If every time you hear a car horn and you laugh out loud, you might be a tailgater. If you can recite the Second Amendment along with Bob, you might be a tailgater. If your hands conduct an orchestra during the big halftime show, you might be.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Pleading for more help. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News.
Russia has turned the Ukrainian sky into a source of death for thousands of people.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, through an interpreter, speaking to both houses of Congress Wednesday, asking for a no-fly zone. But Fox's Jonathan Hunt reports from Lviv.
He understands at this point he is not going to get that no-fly zone. He is not at this point going to get the extra MiG fighters. So they'll take what they can get. They'll fight with what they have got. And the Ukrainians still say they'll fight for every inch of territory.
President Biden has announced the U.S. is sending a new tranche of military hardware to Ukraine.
It includes 800 anti-aircraft systems to make sure the Ukrainian military can continue to stop the planes and helicopters that have been attacking their people and to defend their Ukrainian airspace.
The president, in response to a question about Russian tactics, said he believes that Vladimir Putin is a war criminal. For the first time in nearly 3.5 years, the Fed boosting the cost of money.
Fed officials wrapping up their two-day policy meeting and announcing that it's raising its benchmark interest rate. Fed Chair Jerome Powell.
The FOMC raised its policy interest rate by 1/4 percentage point.
The central bank raising rates for the first time since December of 2018 and signaling up to 6 additional rate hikes this year. The move comes against a backdrop of 40-year high inflation and concerns that Russia's invasion of Ukraine could hurt global economic growth. Fed officials now forecast much slower economic growth this year of 2.8%, down from its 4% estimate in December.
Fox's Hillary Barsky. Wall Street reacting to the news with big gains. The Dow climbing 518 points. NASDAQ jumped 488. The S&P 500 closing 95 points higher. Oil prices staying below $100 a barrel. America is listening to Fox News.
Half a day. This is Jade Uggan from Security Title, and in celebration of Tomorrow Month, here is a tip on dealing with your land. You might be thinking of giving part of your property to your child or another family member. Once you have subdivided the property and recorded the map, you will also need to record the deed transferring the title. Just drawing the map is not enough to make sure they actually own the land. Protehi I Tanonmu. When it comes to your family land, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
We're already Pika's best radio station, but we're always looking for ways to be even better. Announcing The Point on Alexa. In addition to our FM and HD radio feeds, our incredible app, informative website, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live, you can now tell Alexa to stream The Point. And your smart speaker will start playing whatever we're saying. News and views 24/7 with your 4-word command. Alexa, stream The Point.
The federal government has reached settlements in dozens of lawsuits filed over a deadly Florida high school shooting.
The settlement resolves 40 civil suits against the federal government for a total of $127.5 million. In February 2018, a lone gunman, Nicholas Cruz, who was a former student, walked into Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School and opened fire, killing 17 and wounding 17 others. Cruz has pleaded guilty. His sentencing is delayed. Victims' families sued, saying tips the FBI got before that shooting about Cruz weren't acted upon. The settlement does not mean the federal government is admitting fault in what remains the deadliest shooting at a high school in U.S. history. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
Drivers of bigger vehicles like pickup trucks and SUVs are more likely to strike pedestrians while making turns than are drivers of cars. According to a new study released by the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, pedestrian deaths in 2020 were 4% higher than the year before. Last year's numbers not finalized yet. After 6 days in jail, actor Jussie Smollett is free again.
An appeals court agreed with his lawyers that he should be released pending his appeal of his conviction for faking a hate crime after a Cook County judge sentenced Smollett last week to immediately begin serving 150 days in jail for his conviction on 5 felony counts of disorderly conduct for lying to police. Jussie Smollett's attorneys said they strongly disagree with the conviction in this case. They went after the judge, calling him unprofessional for chastising their client.
Fox's Bill Malusian, a judge in Honduras, ruling that former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez should be extradited to the United States to face trial. The Justice Department accuses him of funding his political career through the sales of illegal drugs exported to the U.S. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Hey, what did the grilled cheese sandwich say to their date?
What'd they say?
You make me melt.
Oh, so cheesy. But not as cheesy as Subway's latest Eat Fresh, Refresh menu innovation. The new Fresh Melts with 3 times the cheese. Fresh Melts are the cheese lovers' holy grail. Fresh Melts combine freshly baked breads and your favorite meats topped with a triple load of cheese. All grilled to warm, toasty perfection. Try the ham and cheese melt, tuna melt, or steak and cheese melt to start. Best of all, you can make any footlong into a fresh melt. At Subway, eat fresh.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's the way the program starts every day, and probably will start that way every day from now until the end of the program. So let's start right out with Demi Ekutney. And here's the Daily News. Once again, the Post is still, the editorial boardroom at the Post is still shuttered. They're still on strike, so we only have the editorials from the Daily News. The Daily News says, our view, helping struggling ratepayers is good for all customers. Well, starting right out, I don't think that it's the job of the two utilities to help struggling ratepayers. I think it's their job to provide electricity, water, and sewer service. They're not supposed to be social welfare agencies, although I'm getting the feeling that a lot of people feel the other way. So let's get into this editorial. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted many things about Guam. While the catastrophe has demonstrated many shortcomings in terms of health care and economic viability, issues that have been tested in every country, state, and territory, it also proven that on Guam there is no shortage of goodwill and support for those who need it most. through food commodity distribution, gas vouchers, small business grants, we prove that here on Guam, help is never far away. Now, what does that have to do with goodwill, Jose? The sentence before, there is no shortage of goodwill and support for those who need it most. Through food commodity distribution. Who did that?
The federal government.
And gas vouchers.
That's money from the federal government.
Small business grants.
Same thing.
Yeah. So we prove that here on Guam, help is never far away. And you know, it's our local government that is handing this stuff out. Much of the funding is federal. So what does this have to do with goodwill? It's got absolutely nothing to do with goodwill.
Zero.
Nothing. If you had a civic organization like the Lions or the Rotary or
even Goodwill
or one of those outfits that took it upon themselves, fine. Or, you know, if folks in a neighborhood, you know, I don't know my neighbor very well, but I don't think he's doing very well, so I'm going to bring him over a pot roast tonight so he can have a good meal. That's goodwill.
But I think that's part of the problem. We've redefined what goodwill is government.
I think you're absolutely right. Now, I've made this remark before when I was a youngster. Now, start stretching credibility already. I used to think it was really necessary for me to give to the Red Cross and the community chest every year. When it was time to do that, you know, I always did it. I didn't want to very bad, but I just felt like I had to do it. I don't do that anymore. What's the point? When we've got a government that gives away money faster than I can make it, that's for darn sure. So I think it's really cut the bottom out of goodwill, charity.
Technically, it's your money anyways.
It is indeed, yeah. So, and it's things like this. It's news elements, you know, the so-called media. No shortage of goodwill. Man, our government did so much for the people. We've got lots of goodwill here on Guam.
Wrong.
Next sentence, but along with the good deeds and generosity of a community, which this editorial hasn't addressed so far, that lives and thrives with the anaphemalic spirit. There's no anaphemalic in a government grant. It's been encouraging to see that even our government agencies, where do these people live, are stepping up to do what they can to help struggling customers. The Waterworks Authority last year proposed the implementation of a customer assistance program as part of a larger water affordability proposal submitted to the Public Utilities Commission, said GWA General Manager Maget Berdadzu during a Tuesday meeting of the Consolidated Commission on Utilities. As part of this plan, GWA proposes to spend $5 million a year to improve water service affordability. How do you improve affordability? I think the only way you improve affordability is by reducing the rates.
If you can spend $5 million, you can afford it.
So I'd be all in favor of reducing rates so long as the waterworks remains solvent and able to accomplish its mission. But to give away $5 million of my money to improve service affordability, to help low-income customers identify and repair costly leaks that often drive up water bills. The People's Republic of Waterworks. Well, these types of issues often occur on the customer's private property. Let's face it. Most working families don't have an adequate emergency fund ready for major plumbing leaks and damage that can cost thousands of dollars to identify and thousands more to repair. A plumbing leak that costs thousands of dollars to identify and thousands more to repair? That's wow. Berdallo said these issues involving large unpaid water bills affect all customers and that low-income ratepayers are caught in a vicious cycle. With this aspect of water service reliability and cost in mind, we support GWA in their work with Senator Sabina Paris to find solutions to these problems. While we understand the importance of personal financial responsibility, we don't like it very much. Jose? Yeah. We as a community must consider that our actions can have far-reaching consequences. This is, you know, we don't have to worry too much about socialism infecting our, we're already there. Just as actions like criminal activity and violence affect the safety of our community, our work to help those in need can improve our water rates and service quality. You know, this all goes back to the $36,000 water bill that the poor little lady in her 80s had at her house. So, you know, the solution to that problem is really simple. When you don't pay your water bill, the water service is turned off. I know a person who, you know, is a very reliable person, pays, I'm not going to use a sexist pronoun, pays their bills on time every month, but because of a trip or something, I don't know, kind of got off track on it and didn't pay the bill for 2 months, and that water service was turned off. Now that person only uses like $60 or $70 worth of water a month, but when it got up to 2 months, off it went. So if instead of concentrating on being social welfare operatives here at the Waterworks, if you just do your job, you know, set up a system where a water bill goes beyond where it ought to go and turn off the water. I need an anti-emetic when I read stuff like this.
This op-ed is also an indictment on our real communities outside of the government. It says here that our community can't help this person, only the government.
Only the government can. The folks that live in the same neighborhood, her son, yeah,
exactly,
do-gooders, you know. And there would have been a time when that story ran in the paper and a do-gooder would have taken some time and found her and went out and helped her patch the leak or whatever. But not now. It's only the government. Nobody can do anything except for anybody, including himself, herself, or themselves, except the government. But you know, this whole thing, Miguel Berdazzo, if you just run the waterworks the way it's supposed to be run and don't let people run up $36,000 water bills, you wouldn't have to be a social justice warrior. But of course, which is more fun and which is more rewarding, Jose? Doing your job the way you ought to, or being a social justice warrior?
Well, a $5 million price tag. I hope this meeting wasn't open government compliant.
Yeah, right. We got to go back and check the notice. But the nice thing here is that if this affects rates at all, it's got to go to the Public Utilities Commission, and maybe there will be more sensible people there than Miguel Berdazzo in this social welfare approach. And even if we were going to do something like that, we shouldn't corrupt the operation of a public utility with social work. The public utility should accomplish its mission. For the waterworks, providing potable water on a constant basis in the volume necessary to satisfy all customers at as reasonable a price as can be attained. And the same thing for power. When it comes to, you know, helping poor people and doing social work, that is only going to interfere with what you're supposed to be doing, which will degrade the service, which will create more of these people with problems, which will put more emphasis on the social work department, And that'll be the next thing. We'll see ads in the paper, a deputy director for social work at the waterworks.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Hang on just a second here. I've got to get something. All right, here we are. This is my blue pencil. This is the one that I use to mark blue stars with. This is my green pencil. This is the one that I use for other things other than blue stars. So here's the Daily News editorial for today. And that's their grade for today. Yeah. You know why I'm giving them an F, Jose?
Why is it?
It's the lowest grade I can think of. Maybe I should give them a G, huh? You got to do better than that, Daily News. You're encouraging that which should be discouraged. And your editorial should have reduced to writing some of the stuff I just said.
You know what's kind of also sad, Bob?
Uh-huh.
You didn't even bother to bring your blue pen out for a Jimmy Cotney.
I didn't. No, I didn't. Well, of course, with only one editorial set of writers engaged, and that being the Daily News, my pen can stay in the briefcase most of the time, unfortunately.
Exactly.
It's the show actually feels a lot better when we've got good editorials. I like to deal with really good editorials, give them the blue star, give them a pat on the back, etc. But when we got tripe like this, it's discouraging. It makes me wonder why I even bother to read the darn things. All right, let's hope that we can have more fun with the card than we had with that editorial. All right, this is the card for today. Of course, we start out with systemic racism, and then we've got to take a peek at the public notices that ran in the paper. Fortunately, again today, I didn't find anybody breaking the law. Then we go down to Contractors Licensing Board versus Samsung. A little bit of Marie Miller versus Dave Lujan, not much. And Mises versus Robert Underwood, which has been on the calendar for a while, and I didn't get to it. And because there's such a paucity of local news today, I'm going to have to spend a little bit more time with the Frankfurt School, cultural Marxism, critical race theory, well, I already said critical race theory, didn't I? Yeah. So starting out with systemic racism, not a whole lot. It's not really necessary to say a whole lot. I show you this picture and tell you that the color of the rice in that platter is red. You're all sitting there saying, it looks like it's orange to me. And my response is, you want to get canceled? You want to see a nasty column in the Daily News? You want to see something by Therese Padua Howe in the Daily News that says, readers to Zerzan, leave our red rice alone.
You're essentially providing a community service.
I am indeed. I'm telling the truth about something, which is kind of a rare commodity nowadays in rags like the Daily News. Okay, from there I go on to compliance with Public Law 34, and I mentioned, I think it was yesterday, that even when there are no violations, you can gather so much by looking at these now when you see what these agencies are actually dealing with. For instance, I've got the port here, and let's see, we start out with this really small type. Item number 1, old business, as you were. Item number 5, old business. Number 1, request for creation of position of port terminal supervisor. Resolution 2022-7, creation of port and terminal supervisor. 2, request for creation of position of port terminal worker. Let's see. Then item 6, new business. Resolution Okay, and then there's some more down here at the bottom. It says type is really small. Item number 3, request for creation of position of capital project manager. Item number 4, request for creation of position of port chief engineer, etc. So they're creating 4 positions here. Now, am I just overly suspicious, or would you hear me if I said it's really kind of necessary to create and fill positions when you're only, 7 months from an election? You think there's an element of that going on there?
It's very suspicious.
Yeah.
There are no coincidences, Bob.
In politics, there are no coincidences. Okay, then next on the card, I've got the Contractors Licensing Board versus Samsung. And
can I interrupt you real quick?
Certainly.
I don't know if you have this one on your desk there, the Guam Land Use Commission agenda. I found this interesting. They have roll call number 1, 2, approval of minutes, and then 3, old business, and then brackets, none.
Yeah, I did notice that.
Can they just admit that, or none is?
That's all right.
Yeah, I found that interesting.
Yeah.
None.
And in fact, it may be preferable. At least they thought about it.
Keep the template, just put none.
Yeah, and the idea is that we're trying to inform the public of what's going on, right? So let's say you were dealing with the Ancestral Lands Commission, and you've been there a couple of times. You got a matter that's been pending a couple of times, and you wonder, is it going to come up in the next meeting? Old business? None. So you know it's not. So you can stay home and watch TV. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty good. And some agency really got a hold of it. The Civil Service Commission, the Election Commission are doing a real good job. I think I caught the Visitors Bureau. I think they got it right once of all the stuff they've been putting in the paper. A serial offender. Okay, next item on the card here is the Contractors Licensing Board versus Samsung. And I think if we were to give a trophy, if this trend continues, a real contender for the trophy for the most improved agency of the year, it looks like the Contractors Licensing Board might be in contention. So after they abandoned the buddy system and brought on this new acting director, it seems like they're doing just about everything right, which is quite a contrast to the way they've been doing things before. Okay, this is an article from the Post. Board settles on $300,000 fine for marble erosion. About 6 months have passed since the Contractors License Board voted during a now void meeting. And I just got to stop here, right? And I don't like it when people do this to me, but I just can't resist. I told you so. If you don't do your agenda right, it doesn't make any difference how much the fine is, because whatever you did was void. And you should all be paying attention to this, except the Consolidated Commission on Utilities when they're doing their social welfare stuff. Yeah, about 6 months have passed since the Contractors License Board voted during a now void meeting to fine Samsung $25.5 million for violations involving the controversial Mangilao solar plant project. The board met Wednesday to address the matter again, but this time voted to approve a $300,000 settlement offer with the company. The board first investigated the case in early August 2021. In the month prior, the Guam Environmental Protection Agency issued a notice of violation against Samsung after confirming that approved erosion and settlement controls at the solar farm were not fully installed. Other controls were in process of being installed, but construction was already well underway. I think we probably should go to Chicago here before I get too far into this, Jose.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Attention tailgaters. It's time for you to get a new tail to gate on. And it's a fact. They got a 2021 model clearance going on all kinds of your favorite Nissan models, the Rogue Sport, Kicks, Murano, Titan, and they've all got great FM radios so that you can pick up tall tales in the afternoon. 0% APR or your first 3 payments are on Nissan. Zero down Magic tailgaters. Learn more by visiting nissanguam.com.
And now, back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the one radio show politicians don't want you to listen to. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So here we are, back to the Contractors Licensing Board and Samsung, yeah. So the case caught the eye of lawmakers, the Attorney General, and other government officials as stormwater runoff at the project site impacted nearby residents and the historic Marble Cave. In September 2021, the board voted to issue a $25.5 million fine against Samsung. The board can issue a fine of no less than $200 and up to 50% of the value of the project for violating licensing laws. The $25.5 million fine was based on the $51 million from a permit related to erosion control, clearing, filling, and excavation work. An accusation and statement of charges was served to Samsung in November 2021, informing the company that the Contractors Licensing Board was proposing to take disciplinary action. Now, as I recall, Buddy was the executive director there, and the licensing board hadn't met since August or September. So it's interesting that there
was a September decision.
Yeah, well, this notice was served on them in November when obviously there hadn't been any meetings. However, the September meeting and vote would ultimately be held void for failing to follow the requirements of the open government law. And once again, I got to say it, I told you so. You know, you screw around with that agenda and you don't do it right, and you're going to waste a lot of your time. Contractors Licensing Board acting chairman Bernard Benavente told the Post that the commission had to go back to its findings and re-examine the schedule of values, which refers to a contractor's planned actions and related costs. The overall cost of erosion control measures at Magilo Solar Project was $1.13 million, according to a cost breakdown submitted by Samsung. That's a little bit less than $51 million, isn't it? I guess having these properly noticed meetings is probably a good thing to do. Assistant Attorney General Tom Keeler, counsel for the board, said during Wednesday's board meeting that the parties have worked together in hope of reaching a settlement. In December of 2021, the company submitted a settlement offer in the amount of $250,000. Linda Ibanez, the acting director for the board, stated that they are aware Samsung is doing repair and remediation work for damage caused by the company's failure to follow approved erosion control plans. She recommended that $300,000 be considered a fair settlement of the case, considering the ongoing remediation work. But during Wednesday's board meeting, Benavente said he would like the board to raise the counteroffer to $500,000, based on 50% of the $1.13 million figure. Quote, "You could counter," Ibanez said at the meeting, but in good faith, Samsung had come to the government and apologized and are doing their cleanup. They have this whole crew in and they're working diligently to accept their responsibility. So both the government and contractor are working in good faith. So those are the things we have to account for. Board member Rena Bora said she and the chairman have talked about wanting to get more in the case. How do I spell open government law? You talk to each other during the meeting. Rena and what's Benavente's first name? Yeah.
Bernard.
Rena and Bernard don't talk about it offline.
Or open the Sunshine Law email.
Yeah. Board member Rena Bora said she and the chairman have talked about wanting to get more in the case, but added the board should also recognize they would want businesses to come to Guam and stay on Guam. And I see what they're willing to do after the fact, Bora said. So I believe we should take the director's recommendation. They did do their due diligence, so we should look at that. The board ultimately accepted the recommendation to propose a $300,000 settlement. The Contractors License Board case is just one matter involving Samsung, period. There's still the Guam EPA notice of violation and a pending lawsuit filed by the Office of the Attorney General. I guess this can't be too serious because the Attorney General hasn't filed for a declaratory judgment. Yeah, it's not what the Attorney General did, it's what he didn't do. Filed by the Office of the Attorney General, which includes solar project owner Korea Electric Power Company's Corporation's Guam subsidiary KEPCO Mangilao Solar LLC. World Meridian Sausajan LLC, the property owner of Marble Cave, also sued the contractor and solar project owner, but the parties have reached an agreement on that suit. The 60-megawatt solar farm is being developed under a contract to produce energy to sell to the Power Authority. Under the contract, KEPCO previously stated it expects to generate $340 million for the company over 25 years. In April 2020, KEPCO signed a contract with Mizuho Bank and the Korea Development Bank to borrow $200 million for the project. Yeah, so there you are. And once again, It looks like Linda Abanis is the new shining star here in the government. She's come in and cleaning up the mess created by Buddy Orsini, which is just about as big a mess as Samsung created out there with the runoff surface water. So good for her. And as far as the fine is concerned, what would be a good measure for the fine? Should the fine be the max? Should the fine be the minimum? Should the fine be something in the middle, which is kind of what it turned out to be? Interesting questions, and I'm really glad to see that this has turned around, and I'm wondering what's going to happen to Linda Abanis after they get another director for this agency. I hope they put her talents to use in other places.
Yeah, I think there's already somebody appointed in her position now, right? Sanchez? I got to look it up.
I think you're right, yeah.
Chuck Sanchez Jr.
Yeah, I'm surprised he wasn't at the meeting on Wednesday.
Not in the minutes?
Well, not in the article.
Not in the article, right?
Yeah. You're right, Jose. I forgot about that. Okay, next article. Next item on the calendar here is Marie Miller versus David Lujan. And this deals with the Hansen helicopter trial. And the prosecutor, one of the prosecutor's opening statements is the headline for the article, and it reads like this: "Their love of money led to the death of 9 people."
Ouch.
Yeah, so this has been a pretty hotly contested case. It's been going on for 3 or 4 years. You remember that David Lujan attempted to disqualify Marie Miller, alleging an alleged attempt on her part to entrap him in a matter dealing with Boom Matanonia, who is a defendant in another criminal case dealing with drugs and jury tampering. And Judge Gatewood saying when David Lujan presented that she was inclined to rule for the government, which apparently she did. So now we're hip deep into this trial. The interesting thing about the trial is, in my mind, the defense, because I'll read some of the testimony here. The prosecution starts out with it. Marie starts out like this: "The evidence in this case is going to show that these defendants loved money more than they loved life, justice, and truth. And their love of money led to the death of 9 people, the serious bodily injury of 16 people, the cheating of the people of Guam and the American people, the defrauding of the government, cheating of $400 million from fishing companies, illegal parking, and littering," said Assistant U.S. Attorney Marie Miller. The prosecution told the jury of the Hansen aircraft crash on September 2, 2015, that resulted in the death of pilot Rafael Antonio Cruz Santos. He crashed and went into the water upside down. Mr. Santos drowned. Miller argued the company purchased helicopters were cheaper than usual because they were damaged in previous accidents, as well as helicopters that were destroyed because they didn't really need the helicopter. They needed the paperwork that came along with the helicopter. It saved them millions of dollars. Wow! So, let's see, where's the part that I was looking for here? The defense's opening statement: "Our plea is not guilty," said Mac Martin. Now, his name is not Mick Martin, even though it's St. Patrick's Day. It's Mac Martin. Mac Martin, defense attorney for Walker: "I anticipate the prosecution will come up short with every count of the indictment they have against Mr. Walker. The evidence will be that he bought the company. He decided he wanted to make sure it was done right. The entire case is based on overzealous government investigation, trying to punish innocent and hardworking people. I was looking for the key words there. I didn't see systemic racism. What's going on here? What the government wants you to believe is that Hansen is a big, bad company out to make money. But like any company in the world, they are allowed to make money, said attorney Edward Hand, who represents Hansen. A successful company, a good company, a company that treats its employees very well, at least the ones that don't get killed on the job. Beep, beep. A company that is not in operation for 35 years if it's not doing something right, and so on. So the charges against the defendants include multiple counts of conspiracy to defraud the Federal Aviation Administration and the National Transportation, what's it called? Safety Board. I had some more of the same article here, unless I didn't bring it along.
There are just 2 more paragraphs online.
I guess that's the part I didn't bring along. Can you read them out, Jose?
Hansen operated aerial tours and tuna spotting services for international fishing operations and provided charter services for federal agencies to locations in the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, otherwise inaccessible by air. Trial continues with the government calling its witness before Chief Judge Francis Tadinko Gatewood.
Okay, let's take a short break here. Maybe I can find the part I'm looking for.
Back at it again with the Lenten season menu with Mezcla, giving you a variety of food you can enjoy and pick from, like the fish tacos, spicy buttered shrimp, parrotfish escabeche, lobster pad capral pasta, crab crusted Chilean sea bass, and more. There you have options. Offered at Hagåtña location for lunch and dinner only at Mezcla. For reservations, call 671-479-2652. What are you waiting for? Let's go celebrate the Lenten season with Mezcla.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Well, I can't find it. But I read a good account of the cross-examination and examination in the trial. But somehow I don't have it here. Maybe I can find it and bring it along tomorrow. Okay, next item on the card. This is really a disappointment. It's called Japan versus Capitalism. And it ran in the Post in their Philippines Asia section. And the title is Kishida's new form of capitalism yet to come into focus. A new form of capitalism. There is no roadmap yet to realize the, quote, new form of capitalism that Prime Minister Fumio Kishida adopted as a signature policy of his cabinet inaugurated last October. Kishida is seeking a, quote, virtuous cycle of growth and distribution. Yeah, this doesn't sound good already, right? Through wage increases and other measures To achieve this, he established the Council to realize his new capitalism policy, which he chairs. But the latest meeting of the Council on March 8th was held after an interval of 3 months. Discussions on the overall picture and how to secure financial resources are yet to begin. How can Kishida realize the virtuous cycle? Kishida envisions a strategy of first expanding the overall economic pie through growth and then distributing the fruits of that growth in the form of higher wages. The meeting of March 8th put forward the promotion of science and technology as the government hopes to encourage the cultivation of seeds of new technology by strengthening research and development. In the future, discussions will focus on topics such as digitization and the promotion of support for startups. As early as this spring, the government plans to compile a grand design to provide major direction of the new form of capitalism and an action plan to resolve specific issues. It hopes to reflect these results in its basic policy on economic and fiscal management and reform, which will be finalized as early as June. Kishida came up with the idea of the new form of capitalism inspired by an awareness of problems with neoliberalism, which prioritizes free competition to develop the economy and increase efficiency. What a crazy idea that is. He believes that neoliberalism has led to widening disparities and that the benefit of growth have not been spread to all parts of society. As rectifying disparities has become a major theme in Europe and the United States, China, and elsewhere, Kishida's approach is in line with the global trend, and I'm afraid that that's true. But you'd think of any place in the world that would understand capitalism and would fight like a tiger to keep it in place, it would be Japan. It may be the most successful capitalist country in the world. And, you know, you got to remember that Japan was isolated until 1857. They didn't want to deal with foreigners, foreign ideas, or anything like that. They were just going to stay and die Nippon. Well, Admiral Perry kind of forced the opening of China to the rest of the world, and boy, did they catch up fast. They caught up so fast that in 1904, in a fight that they had with Russia, they sank the Russian fleet in the Straits of Tsushima and came from, you know, an isolated feudal state to a world power in less than 50 years. And their success continued on to the point where they thought they could challenge countries like the United States, the United Kingdom, etc. And, of course, they lost, and they lost bad. Their country was really beaten down. But, you know, a measure of success sometimes is not how high you fly, but how high you bounce back. And that, if that's the criteria, I don't think any country in the world, well, Germany's a pretty good example too. I don't think any country in the world bounced back higher than Japan did. 20 years ago, we were worried about Japan, you know, being taken over for the United States as being the most prosperous country in the world.
Or that it retook over Guam.
Exactly. Yeah, they bought Pebble Beach Country Club, and they bought up all kinds of stuff here on the island, including Kent Jones's house. Yeah. So when they start getting into this social justice approach to capitalism, it is a really, really bad sign. It's bad enough that we got Democrats trying to do it here. Yeah, very disappointing. Next, I have I have Robert Underwood. My paper straightened out here. Critical race theory is a form of Marxist re-education. And this is an article that ran in the Mises website. Mises website, a website that is grounded in libertarianism and the Austrian school of economics, Ludwig von Mises. It's a really good website, some really good stuff that the liberals will just hate. And the title of this article is Critical Race Theory is a Form of Marxist Re-Education. Now, I want to remind you, in case you haven't been following this along, we have our own resident critical race theory educator here on the island, and none other than Robert Underwood, who in his weekly column said, I have been teaching critical race theory since 1972. Every course that I've ever taught and nearly every public policy speech I've given in D.C. or Guam involved critical race theory. So we've got our own expert right here. We don't need no stinking Black Lives Matter. We got Robert Underwood. All right, critical race theory is the tip of a 100-year-long spear designed to gore the side of Western civilization, said Jared Lindsay in a recent workshop on the topic of critical race theory. Although these words sound dramatic, they accurately describe what CRT is. A set of ideological tools that are rooted in neo-Marxism, postmodernism, some argue Freudian psychology, and are used to re-educate the people by remodeling their psyches. And I'll get into that in some depth. Because critical race theory is Marxist in nature, the goal of creating correct consciousness for the, quote, new man, or the, quote, socialist man to be born remains well alive in critical race theory's application anywhere in society. In the context of critical race theory, this new man possesses critical consciousness that enables the individual to see power dynamics based on race relations everywhere, and is the basis of everything in society, and importantly, to become an activist against these forces trying to change the world by putting the ideology of critical race theory in practice. Now, Robert has been doing this since 1972, according to his own column. After all, Karl Marx said that the philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. Our task is to change it. In other words, critical race theory must be acted out in society. So it's not just enough to say, I taught it. I acted it out in society in order for the critical consciousness to arise and the new man to be forged. To bring about this critical consciousness, the individual must go through a process of re-education, aided by tools based on critical race theory, such as training in implicit bias. Oh, those racist insular cases. Diversity and inclusion, or anti-racism. These practices are already widespread in the Western world. Boy, I guess so. For example, during the Barack Obama years, the Department of Justice required some 28,000 employees to undergo training to, quote, recognize and address implicit bias. More recently, a magazine called The Spectator wrote in 2020 that Google, Facebook, The FTSE 100 government departments, including Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Justice, and nonprofits proudly advertise programs they put their staff through. In other words, the individual or institution is required to engage with the presumed issue in order to change society. Failure to achieve a positive outcome is a sign of false consciousness under critical theory, social justice, or race relations. Anti-racist training involves confessing one's thought crimes. Confessing one's thought crimes. Wow. I was just wondering, is Playboy magazine still on the newsstands? All right, let's take a short trip here to our halftime show, and we'll be right back to Robert Underwood and critical race theory.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The brutality continues. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Russian forces hammering Ukrainian cities with bombs and artillery shells, attacking a theater in Mariupol where people were sheltering. Local rescue workers say hundreds of people may be buried in the rubble.
It seems increasingly that Russian President Vladimir Putin is willing to turn to the slaughter of civilians as a method of pursuing his goals in this war. Putin's rationale seems to be, well, to control Ukraine, I need to destroy it first. And that's why we're seeing this blanket bombing of so many cities.
Fox's Jonathan Hunt in Lviv. President Biden yesterday offering mixed messages on the violence.
During a crowded White House event, President Biden was asked by Fox's Jackie Heinrich if he thought Russia's Vladimir Putin is a war criminal. At first, the president said no. Then a few moments later, he said yes.
I think he is a war criminal.
Earlier in the day, the president condemned Russia's invasion and promised more weapons to Ukraine. A Russian state media outlet reported a Kremlin spokesman responded to the war criminal label saying, quote, "We consider unacceptable and unforgivable such rhetoric of the head of state."
Fox's Sean Lanchel in Washington. There's word from the talks between the Ukrainian and Russian delegates. An aide to President Zelensky telling the AP the main subject under discussion in the peace talks is whether Russian troops would remain in the separatist regions in eastern Ukraine after the war and where the borders would be. The world has now passed 6 million deaths from the coronavirus, according to the numbers kept by Johns Hopkins University. The World Health Organization says the number of new COVID deaths reported worldwide fell by 17% in the last week, even as infections rose, reversing a decline in infections that first began in January. America is listening to Fox News.
We're already Pika's best radio station, but we're always looking for ways to be even better. Announcing the point on Alexa. In addition to our FM and HD radio feeds, our incredible app, informative website, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live, you can now tell Alexa to stream The Point. And your smart speaker will start playing whatever we're saying. News and views 24/7 with your 4-word command. Alexa, stream The Point. Back at it again with the Lenten season menu with Mezcla. Giving you a variety of food you can enjoy and pick from, like the fish tacos, spicy buttered shrimp, parrotfish escabeche, lobster pad capral pasta, crab-crusted Chilean sea bass, and more. There you have options. Offered at Hagåtña location for lunch and dinner only at Mezcla. For reservations, call 671-479-2652. What are you waiting for? Let's go celebrate the Lenten season with Mezcla.
The U.S. hopes to soon have its hands on former Central American head of state Juan Orlando Hernandez.
The U.S. wants the former Honduran president on drug trafficking and weapons charges. Hernandez denies any wrongdoing, but American prosecutors say He funded his political career with profits from drug traffickers. They say he would get money in exchange for protecting shipments, some of those shipments going to the U.S. Hernandez can still appeal the court's decision to extradite him. He was arrested at his home in February at the request of the U.S. government. Jill Nato, Fox News.
Actor Jussie Smollett has been released from jail after serving 6 days of a 150-day sentence for faking a hate crime, an appeals court agreeing with his lawyers that he should be free pending an appeal. The Federal Reserve raising its benchmark short-term interest rates 1/4 point, the first of what could be up to 7 rate hikes this year. The Fed's key rate, which has been near zero since the pandemic recession began 2 years ago. Those rate hikes eventually will mean higher loan rates for many consumers and businesses. One of baseball's most sought-after free agents this year, off the market. The LA Dodgers reportedly signing former Braves first baseman Freddie Freeman to a 6-year, $162 million deal. There'll be plenty twin bills in baseball this season.
Major League Baseball Wednesday announced 30 additional doubleheaders for this upcoming regular season to accommodate a 162-game campaign in full, while making up for the delay brought on by stalled talks to end the 99-day-long lockout. The new schedule will see the New York Yankees and Boston Red Sox open things up April 7th, with the season now ending October 5th. 5 games rescheduled for July 21st, the second day after the MLB All-Star Game, with the Detroit Tigers and Oakland Athletics actually taking part in an unusual doubleheader at Comerica Park on May 10th, where the A's will be the home team for the opener and Detroit the home team for the nightcap.
Fox's Matt Napolitano. And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Half a day. This is Jade Ugin from Security Title, and in celebration of Tomorrow Month, here is a tip on dealing with your land. You might be thinking of giving part of your property to your child or another family member. Once you have subdivided the property and recorded the map, you will also need to record the deed transferring the title. Just drawing the map is not enough to make sure they actually own the land. Protehi I Tanonmu. When it comes to your family land, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help. So we left off here at the beginning of this article dealing with anti-racist training. So that's where I'll pick up after that excellent halftime show that we just enjoyed, as is our usual custom. So here it goes. Anti-racist training involves confessing one's thought crimes. As an example, the assumed innate racism of white people, or reporting on or being reported by friends, colleagues, or neighbors for wrong ideas. So if your neighbors have wrong ideas, you've got to report on them.
Just real quick, this happened in real life. The people that were at the White House or at the legislative building in Washington, D.C. on January 6th had their family members, their friends, their neighbors call in the FBI. Whether or not they did anything or went into the Capitol, that's how they arrested a lot of people, just from these people calling in.
They ratted out their own families. Yeah.
Just for having a diverse thought.
Well, it's pretty dangerous. Going on, being forced to listen how one has, this is part of anti-racist training, being forced to listen how one has contributed to oppression because of views or ideas one has uttered or is assumed to hold, being more or less coerced to take positive action in changing the assumed state of oppression that one has been deemed guilty of, and justifications for ethnic monitoring and segregation, such as why there should be spaces for black people only. This is all part of critical race theory. Once these ideas have been drilled down into someone's psychological makeup, then the critical consciousness has been awakened and the person is a new man. Critical race theory began as a field in critical legal studies based on the works of Derek Bell, a law professor at Harvard. In particular, two of his books are regarded as the foundational text for CRT. Race, Racism, and American Law. That's one book. And the other one is called Faces at the Bottom of the Well. In these two texts, Bell lays down the arguments for what became the core tenets of critical race theory, which included that race is a byproduct of social forces, that white people are unlikely to be aware of their prejudices, which minorities must point out, and that racism is a permanent feature of American society, invalidating the achievements of liberalism. Now, when we say liberalism, we're not talking about, the far left progressives like the Squad and people like that. Liberalism used to be a good thing. Liberalism stood for things like freedom of speech, free enterprise, individual responsibility, and freedom. But the left made such a mess of that they had to dump it and start using the word progressive. Social forces oppress different minorities through racialization at different times. However, what exactly is critical race theory? When Bell was asked this question, I don't know what it is. To me, it means telling the truth, even in the face of criticism. Well, he could be a host of tall tales if that's the case. This definition, as much as it appeals to our emotions, it is of no use to us in understanding what CRT is. Here are a couple more complete definitions from a book called Critical Race Theory, The Key Writings That Form the Movement, organized by a collection of neo-Marxist intellectuals, former New Left activists, ex-counterculturists, and varieties of oppositionists in law school. The Conference of Critical Legal Studies, where critical race theory was developed, established itself as a network of openly leftist law teachers, students, and practitioners committed to exposing and challenging the ways American law served to legitimize an oppressive social order. And from the World Socialist website, quote, the online publication of the world's Trotskyist movement, the International Committee of the Fourth International and its official affiliated sections in the socialist equality parties around the world, in an essay published in 2021, The Ideological Foundations of Critical Race Theory, we learn that critical race theory is a broad current with many tributaries flowing into it and many offshoots flowing out of it. In characterizing this whole current, it is therefore useful to begin at the most basic level with its fundamental philosophical conceptions, the heritage of which can be traced to postmodernism and conceptions advanced by the Frankfurt School. This is the critical theory from which critical race theory emerges. Critical race theory takes the rejection of the Enlightenment from the Frankfurt School and postmodernism and adds a racial spin. Essentially, the works of Bell found a home right in the middle of left-wing thought, giving birth to CRT we know today, which has been defined above, linking Bell's works with Marxism and postmodernism. However, it must be stressed that training based on critical race theory is a much milder form of Marxist re-education. The communist regimes of the last century were much more brutal and aiming to transform the psychology of the individual into that of the socialist man. As detailed in a 3-volume work by Romanian historian Mircea Stănescu, the idea and process of re-education was central to the workings of communist regimes and their attempt to remodel human nature and fabricate the new man or the socialist man. It happened in China, North Korea, Vietnam, the Soviet Union, Romania, and I forgot Cambodia under Pol Pot. In all these instances, the process was broadly similar, although it differed in brutality and duration. In a nutshell, the Marxist re-education process in communist regimes involved substantial physical and psychological torture that forced victims to confess thought crimes, disavow their family and friends, to pledge lifelong commitment to the communist ideal, to show total ongoing loyalty to the party and completely abandon their previous faulty identities in order to become clean slates on which the new man could stand. As such, there are similarities between Marxist re-education process of critical race theory and that of communist regimes of the 20th centuries. And I'll get into that a little bit more with the publication I've got here. Now, this is heavy-duty stuff. This is kind of thick, and maybe you're wondering, well, yeah, but what does it have to do with me? And unfortunately, the answer to that is a lot. Because whatever happens in the mainland, whatever goes on there, sooner or later winds up here. We've been somewhat protected so far. But do you ever wonder why so many things that you thought you were sure of, absolutely sure of, change so fast? Let's just stop and think a little bit. Let's think about, say, before the year 2000, which was a real benchmark. You know, when I was in college, I knew for sure that there'd be a year 2000 because I'd looked at the calendar, but I didn't think it would ever really arrive. It just seemed so far in the distance. But it did. But before the year 2000, if a prominent figure, if a cabinet member in the United States president's cabinet said, I got to take paternity leave because my husband and I have just adopted a baby, you'd have said, there must be a misprint here. Something's wrong. That guy, Pete Buttigieg, is a man. And he says his husband, and they no, something's really wrong here. Or if you thought if anybody in the year 1999 came along and said, I'm going to introduce a bill in our legislature that will allow a man to marry another man, and I'm not going to be sexist about it, the same bill will allow a woman married to, whoa, you know, you couldn't get elected to be the garbage collector in the south side of Chicago with that kind of a platform. It was just outrageous.
Not even Obama ran on that platform.
Exactly. He disavowed it until he got to be president. Then he let his inner truth come out. Yeah. So it was just, you know, because you've known all your life. Well, yeah, when Junior gets married, he finds a nice girl and gets married and raises a family. Or, gosh, Susie's going off to college. Maybe she'll find a rich husband when she gets there. so they can get married and have lots of kids. So, nowadays, we don't think in those terms. Herman's getting married. Oh, really? What's his name? No, he's marrying a woman. Well, what the hell's wrong with him? Is he behind the times? And I very sarcastically on the show mentioned, when I really stopped to think about it and think about my mom and dad, how backward they were. First of all, my mother married a man. And
unthinkable these days.
Yeah, and my mother never tried to be anything but a woman. And the same way with my dad.
Was she also a housewife?
She was indeed.
Oh, I can't believe that.
Yeah. What was the world? How backward we were back in those days, right?
I'm so sorry, Bob.
Yeah. Yeah, and then obviously, but when she was, she didn't even have an abortion, for crying out loud.
I don't believe you.
Yeah. And if my mother had been in tune with the times, she would have said something like this. It's impossible to separate our choice of whether and when to have children from every other choice in our lives. That's what Vanessa Williams, a modern woman, said, right?
That's supposed to be the responsible statement.
Exactly, yeah. So when a person would say this in public without being run out of town on a rail or put in the stocks in the village square, and all of this stuff has happened since the year 2000. The idea, and along the same lines, if the year 1999, you're visiting your friends and you say, "Where's Susie?" Oh, there's no Susie anymore. Susie is Sammy now. Susie is Sammy? Yes, she is a boy. Are we talking about the same Susie? The one that, that I always bought yes, that's Sammy now. So please be nice to Sammy. Did you ever think things like that would happen?
I never thought.
I don't think anybody did. So how did the things that you were so sure of turn around and head south so fast? Back take a look at 2001, the Twin Towers incident. How many people after the Twin Towers, after the two planes flew into the Twin Towers, said, "Well, America deserves it. America was always been a slave country, and it's always been system." How many people said that then?
That was a rare moment where everybody got together.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But that kind of talk then would have gotten you a brick in the face, probably. So how did everything change so fast? And that's why I think this whole thing, this article that I read, is so important, because we need to know how it changed so fast, and we need to be on the lookout for it right here in our island.
And it's not that none of that talk occurred or existed. Don't get,
Yeah.
It's the fact that it's so accepted and even celebrated now.
Exactly.
And that's the scary part.
It is. So, can it happen here? Well, once again, I've got a copy of the Daily News with Robert Underwood's column in it. I have been teaching critical race theory since 1972. Every course I have ever taught and nearly every public policy speech I have given in Washington, D.C. or Guam involved critical race theory. I engaged it, analyzed it, and tried to explain how racist policies and attitudes impact our lives today, and not just our history. And he just goes right into it. And, of course, it all ties into his separatist desires, the People's Independent Republic of Guam.
Well, here's a soft example. We have a story about that that twin who had passed away in
Yeah,
2021. I don't know if you're going to talk about it today.
Yeah.
But everyone keeps thinking, well, the headline said the unconstitutional action of not allowing SSI residents to receive SSI. It's not unconstitutional, and it's not a racist action. It's just that Congress hasn't acted on it for Guam.
Yeah.
But that's not the mindset anymore.
No,
Nobody wants
no.
to believe that.
Yeah, if we don't like it, it's racist. Yeah. And that's exactly Underwood, you know, systemic racism. The country doesn't live up to its ideals. And certainly Bavacqua and a couple of their fellow travelers there just keep hammering home on that. The United States is a bad country. Women can marry women, men can marry men. A man can be a woman if he wants to, and vice versa. We can kill 61 million babies in the womb and think nothing of it. How did all of these things happen? And it is a little bit complicated, but I will try to kind of bring you up to speed on it here. I've got an article that I found on a website called Academia that publishes a lot of Marxist stuff.
Hold on, I got to strap in.
Yeah. Well, it's now I got to clarify something. I'm not an academic, so I've never suffered that the impairment of brain power caused by a lack of oxygen that people suffer who climb up that ivory tower where the altitude really gets to them. So the title of this article is Frankfurt School and Cultural Marxism. And it starts out long before old-fashioned Marxism was defeated in 1991, it had evolved a still more dangerous mutant called cultural Marxism. This mutant of Marxism thinking now appears to have taken over the cultural and intellectual life of the capitalist West. It appears to have taken over, not going to take over or trying to take over, appears to have taken over. And you look at what you see in the so-called mainstream media, on TV and everywhere else you look, it's a fact. So before I dive into this, I know there's a few straight talkers here on the island. One of them is R. Keith. So let's hear from R. Keith. Go ahead, R. Keith.
Hi, Bob. Hi, Jose. You know, I just wanted to bring up that we were warned that this was going to happen. It's not like that this happened in complete darkness. I'm going to say Khrushchev, but I may be wrong, that we will defeat you from the inside. I remember my parents teaching me that way back in the 70s, that one of the communist leaders said that out loud and very vocally. Mm-hmm. And it was dismissed and forgotten. And since that time, my lifetime, the Maoists and Marxists have done a fine job of infesting every institution of this country, while, I'll say, quote, normal Americans, unquote, capitalists, conservatives, libertarians, weren't paying attention. We were busy making money. You know, they're ideologues that they are. They went into education, government, and worked like termites to destroy the building from within. And voila, here we are.
I agree with you 100%. Our case, you hit the nail right on the head.
Can you remember who it was that said that? Was it Khrushchev?
It was Nikita Khrushchev, and he said, "We don't have to invade America. We will take America without firing a shot. We don't have to invade the U.S. We will destroy you from within."
Uh-huh.
There it is. There it is. And it's not just us. I mean, you look at the UK, Australia, New Zealand, most of the nations of Western Europe and the EU. They've really done a fine job, you know. One has to wonder what will save us. Will we brighten up? Will we fall? Or will something, God forbid, even worse come along and stop the whole process in its shoes? I don't know. But we were warned.
Absolutely, and now that it's happening, we got to take some action. We've got to stop it.
There's a very interesting, no, not interesting, that's certainly not the right word, alarming video that I saw. It may have been on the UK Daily Mail, where there was a conservative speaker that was brought into the Yale Law School to participate in a conference on free speech. I'll pause while you laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And you should see it. I mean, it was like all ready for tar and feathering. The epithets and the name, the F-bombs and the threats of violence. Police were brought in to protect her while she spoke at a free speech conference. I don't know.
Yeah, that's exactly where we are. And of course, academia, the colleges are the nest inhabited by these creatures. And the last thing they want is free speech. If you get into this a little ways, there was a guy named Herbert Marcuse, who was a member of the Frankfurt School, came to the United States like all of them did in 1933, but he stayed here and got a job at Columbia. And during the 60s, one of the chants was Marx, Mao, and Marcuse. These are the guys. And he came up with a concept of repressive tolerance. So that people who are saying the right things must be given the opportunity to speak freely. But we should not tolerate those who have antisocial ideas. They must be suppressed.
What Keith is talking about, what you're talking about, Keith.
Really familiar.
Yeah,
Sorry.
This was what you're talking about. What happened at Yale just happened a couple days ago on March 10th. It was a panel between a speaker named Monica Miller of a Progressive American Humanists Association and Kristen Wagner of the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a conservative group. So it's a bipartisan, so to speak, agreeing on free speech and religious rights. And what's scary is these are Yale law students who interrupted, who wouldn't allow anybody to speak, and were getting so violent that the cops did have to come in. And then when the cops came, they got even more violent.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable. This is academia.
Yeah. Well, it is, unless you trace the migration of this whole neo-Marxist movement from the Frankfurt School into the colleges. That was the first place. Now, we look back at the 60s, and what we remember about the 60s is, Woodstock, Let It All Hang Out, tie-dye jeans, and all that. But that's where it was. And those radicals then were infected by that critical race theory virus then are now running the colleges and universities.
Yep. When I was a kid, I grew up near Pennsylvania Military College, which is now Widener University. And you see I'd see the little snippets on TV about Woodstock and the partying and the concerts. And I distinctly recall asking this. I was single digits somewhere, 7, 8, 9. I said, was it really fun back then? And my parents turned off the TV, and we had a very serious conversation. And they said, no, you're seeing one side of it. And they gave me a good description of, for instance, the radicals that would spit on the veterans coming home from Vietnam and what they were pulling at Pennsylvania Military College and Valley Forge Military College. And a lot of them stemmed from Swarthmore, which is a snake pit of liberalism for many decades. And they warned us, and they said, my parents said, these people unfortunately are going to be in control one day. Well, truer words are never spoken.
And here we are.
Let's pray for the November elections, and meanwhile apply for a gun permit, folks.
I got you. I think you're right, Keith. Thanks a lot for chiming in and sharing some of your personal experiences with us.
Thank you, Bob. Have a good weekend. I probably won't call in tomorrow because I'm busy.
See you Monday.
Take it easy, guys.
All right, let's head for Chicago, Wrigley Field, and the big seventh inning stretch.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Hey, what did the grilled cheese sandwich say to their date?
What'd they say?
You make me melt.
Oh, so cheesy. But not as cheesy as Subway's latest Eat Fresh, Refresh menu innovation. The new Fresh Melts with 3 times the cheese. Fresh Melts are the cheese lover's holy grail. Fresh Melts combine freshly baked breads and your favorite meats topped with a triple load of cheese. All grilled to warm, toasty perfection. Try the ham and cheese melt, tuna melt, or steak and cheese melt to start. Best of all, you can make any footlong into a fresh melt. At Subway, eat fresh.
Attention, tailgaters. It's time for you to get a new tail to gate on. It's a fact. They got a 2021 model clearance going on all kinds of your favorite Nissan models, the Rogue Sport, Kicks, Murano, Titan, and they've all got great FM radios so that you can pick up tall tales in the afternoon. 0% APR, or your first 3 payments are on Nissan. Zero down magic tailgaters. Learn more by visiting NissanGuam.com.
Wrigley Field in Chicago, the world's most beautiful ballpark. We go there every day for the 7th inning stretch. Having stretched out a little bit, we've got 2 innings left of today's episode of Tall Tales, so we'll get right back into it. Picking up, maybe before I do that, notice I got somebody in the green room here. Maybe I'll accommodate that call. Frenchie wants to chime in on neo-Marxism. I have a feeling that he's got a good handle on it. And then we'll come back and I'll talk about neo-Marxism in the colleges. Go for it, Frenchie.
Well, hello, Robert. How
Hi,
are you?
Good.
I think Keith said most of it right, yeah.
Yes, sir.
I have been looking at what's happening in Europe for many years, and in Europe you had the Communist Party was always fairly large in countries like Italy, France, even Austria. In Germany, not so much because there was 2 Germanys until the 90s, right?
Yes.
But what was happening is that there was another communist movement that was very present in the universities, even in the high schools. It was the Trotskyists. Now, for those of us that are a little younger, the Trotskyists was a branch of the communists who basically advocated for permanent revolution. And they've been present everywhere, and most of what you see nowadays as the black blocs and the Antifa and all those things, they are usually Trotskyist movements. They are the young people that are organizing to fight fascism, quote unquote. And it's very interesting that in Europe, a lot of those people in the 60s and 70s, some of them got very radicalized. In Italy, for example, you had the Red Brigades who was kidnapping politicians and captains of industries. Those people were very violent. Same thing in France. Same thing In Sweden, if you remember, the Olaf Palme was assassinated by a Trotskyist. So you had a lot, and he was not a capitalist; he was a socialist. But their hate of our Western system was very much strong. The other places where they were very present was, of course, Asia, because most of the communists in Vietnam, for example, which quite a few people here on the island went to fight in the 60s, they were inspired by the Trotskyists. Ho Chi Minh, Van Tuck, all those people were inspired by the Trotskyists. And the Trotskyist movement is what inspired people like Che Guevara and others in South America. So those people are very radical. They advocated violent uprisal of the labor class against what they call the bourgeoisie, the decadent bourgeoisie, which they saw as passive. And what happened is that those people, after a while, doing the revolution is kind of fun when we are young, but when you start having a family and everything, you need to put butter in the spinach. So they all came back and didn't change their point of view, but they kind of went back in society. And in the U.S., they were very much present. You had the famous Socialist Worker Party, which I think was, what was his name, the leader, Dwight McDonald, I think it was McDonald, who had a fight with Trotsky in the 30s and 40s, but those people still exist. The Socialist Workers' Party are the people that organized the riots in Minneapolis, So those people have always been there. They have had a tendency to melt in society, as we've seen the Chicago School of revolutionaries with all their things. They actually influenced Obama. Those people were part of the Obama administration. Many of them are in the academic world. Many of them are working in state or federal agencies. And they, like Keith mentioned, they do a work of termite within those agencies and keep on eating away one at a time every institutions that we have. There is I have a senior moment right now on the name of that journalist. Is an Australian journalist that has immigrated to the U.S. and who is a specialist on communist infiltration within the U.S. government. And he has identified almost state by state who are those people, who are the communists, who are the Trotskyists, who are the Maoists, and what they are doing. Most of them have joined the Democratic Party in places like Houston, Dallas, Austin, in Texas, but also in Florida, in Baltimore, in Chicago, everywhere, in Minneapolis. And they have gone at the local level in your school boards, in your election boards, and so on, and they are controlling all those apparatus. And of course, they facilitate extremist agenda while they themselves are making very high salaries by being within the system. But they are still working, even though they said, oh, well, when I was young, I was a Marxist, but I no longer am. Now I'm a Democrat. They are not. They still are pushing the same agenda. They're hiding. I always denounce here Senator Perez. She's a typical case. She's a hardcore Marxist posing as a Democrat and doing a work of termite here on Guam in our own government. And I'm sure there are others. I think Bevacqua, which I call the Che Bevacqua, with good reason, is because he's one of those termites. And Booby Underwood is not that far from those kind of of those radicals that have a front of respectability, but in fact are fighting tooth and nail to destroy everything this country stands for. And I am not as optimistic as Keith for next November, because what I saw last night at the joint session of the Senate and the House, standing ovation for a crook billionaire whose name appears in the Panama Papers, who is a Jew who is relying on neo-Nazi groups who have actually engaged in ethnic cleansing, and we are putting him as a hero of resistance. And the Republicans are taking the bet on that one, hook and sinker. And I have a lot of questions about how stupid can conservatives be that they are giving in this manipulation by Biden and all the people from the Hillary administration who are leftist and hardcore communists. Now, don't forget the highest rank advisor to Obama is a quote-unquote former communist. She's still a communist. So we have had people infiltrating our government at every level, locally, at the state level, and at the highest offices of the government. And when you see some of the appointees that Biden is putting in, some of them are getting bumped. They are pushing agendas, for example, on the green agenda. The only thing green, they are like watermelon. They are green on the outside, they are red on the inside. And, you know, they poo-poo your senator from Wisconsin in the 50s and 60s, but he had his finger on the pulse. And we are fighting a very difficult fight here because those people are helped by the oligarchs in this country that have kidnapped all our media. Most of our media are controlled by billionaires that do not care about the U.S. Constitution, and they find it very, very beneficial for them to cooperate with countries like communist China and so on, and they are pushing that agenda that Putin is a communist. And, you know, we need a boogeyman. We have scared people for 2 years with that virus, with the Wuhan virus. Before that, we were scaring people with a terrorist. Before that, we were scaring people with the drug dealers. All of this came at a high price because we were told we could not use cash anymore. Well, I'm sorry, but cash is what keeps us free. And right now, slowly but surely, like a boa constrictor, we are being squeezed out of our freedoms of using cash if we want to, and we are going to have a bigger and bigger government, and bigger government only means totalitarianism, and this is where we're going. And so Keith is right on many of those things. Maybe he doesn't see as much, but we have to be very careful. And here on Guam, we have the same people that you are denouncing every day on your show. But that's what they're doing. And in France, we had a prime minister that was a former Trotskyist who said he was a socialist later on, but he came very close to become the president of the country. In Germany, Angela Merkel, Mutti, she was East German, and she had belonged to the Communist Party in East Germany. Those are the two of the biggest countries in Western Europe, and they are totally infiltrated by communists. Now, there were a Communist Party who is now representing almost nothing, but when I was young, they represented almost 30% of the electorate, which is a huge chunk. That's about what the Democrats influence in the U.S., 30%. So we have to be very careful, watch really, and as you say, the schools are totally been kidnapped. The universities are a field of intolerance and racialism. I mean, the anti-racist movement is the most racist movement in the world. Basically they're advocating separation of races based on your looks, which is everything we've been fighting against for the last 50 years. So those are tools that they use in order to slowly but surely erode all the institutions of our country, starting with the family, thanks to abortion, divorce, and so on, and then it's the other institutions. And we are, if people wake up, it's going to be a tough fight. And I'm not sure, when I saw what I saw yesterday at the House and Senate meeting, looking at Zelensky, I couldn't believe it. I almost puked. It was so disheartening when to see Pelosi trying to make points with that thing. I mean, at the expense of thousands of people that are getting killed and maimed because we have corrupt people in a government who don't want to, who are doing our bidding, actually, or the bidding of the oligarchs that control our country. So we are in dire straits, like the song used to say,
True enough, Frenchie. Very enlightening as usual, Frenchie. I got to head for Churchill Downs, but I'm really glad you called.
Yeah.
And we'll keep working on this, okay?
Yeah, I'm going to try to find out the name of that journalist. He wrote several books I think are very interesting for people that might want to read. This thing is extremely well researched on, and he has names, place, positions, and everything.
Looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Frenchie. So long. All right, let's head for Churchill Downs here for the home stretch.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Back at it again with the Lenten season menu with Mezcla, giving you a variety of food you can enjoy and pick from, like the fish tacos, spicy buttered shrimp, parrotfish escabeche, lobster pad capral pasta, crab-crusted Chilean sea bass, and more. There you have options. Offered at Hagåtña location for lunch and dinner only at Mezcla. For reservations, call 671-479-2652. What are you waiting for? Let's go celebrate the Lenten season with Mezcla.
So here we are, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky, for the home stretch of Tall Tales. A couple more furlongs. I'll be crossing the finish line and wrapping up another day here on Tall Tales. Kind of feeling a little bit down, though, because tomorrow is that day. I hate to even mention the name of the day, Jose.
Don't say it.
Yeah.
Don't say it.
Last day of our week. It's tough. Okay, picking up on the idea of what has happened to our colleges, perhaps Robert Underwood being a good example. Beginning in the 1960s, from Boston to Berkeley, the teachers of America's teachers absorbed and taught a new Cliff Note style sacred history. America was born tainted by Western civilization's original sins: racism, sexism, greed, genocide against natives and the environment, all wrapped in religious obscurantism and on the basis of hypocritical promises of freedom and equality. secular saints from Herbert Crowley and Woodrow Wilson to Franklin Roosevelt and Barack Obama have been redeeming those promises, placing America on the path of greater justice in the face of resistance from the mass of Americans who are racist, sexist, but above all stupid. So Crowley, Wilson, Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, and Barack Obama have been trying to take us the right way, but they've been resisted, by the American people who by the mass of American people who are racist, sexist, but above all stupid. To consider such persons on the same basis as their betters would be, as President Obama has called it, false equivalence. Thus credentialed, molded, and opinionated, a uniform class now presides over nearly all federal and state government bureaucracies, over the media, the educational establishments, and major corporations. Like a fraternity, it requires speaking the in language, signifying that one is on the right side. So don't you ever dare say, I didn't like Roosevelt, he was not a good president. Because then you're obviously you're not speaking the right language. You've got to say, they were not a good president.
Canceled.
Absolutely. Yeah, it requires speaking the in language, signifying that one is on the right side and joins to bring grief upon outsider Americans who run afoul of its members. Just like your example of the folks trying to talk about free speech at Yale and being shouted down. What a horrible, how dare you come into a college campus with such a stupid idea as free speech? Get out of here. No more than its European counterparts does America's progressive ruling class offer any vision of truth, goodness, beauty, or advantage to attract the rest of society to itself. Like its European kin, all that American progressivism offers is obedience to the ruling class enforced by political correctness. Nor is there any endpoint to what is politically correct any more than there was to communism. Here and now, as everywhere and always, it comes down to glorifying the party and humbling the rest. The imposition of PC, political correctness, has no logical end, because feeling better about oneself by confessing other people's sins, humiliating and hurting them, is an addictive pleasure, the appetite for which grows with each satisfaction. The more fault I find in thee, the holier I am than thou. The worse you are, the better I am, and the more power I should have over you. That's classic eco-fascist jabber, isn't it? If you don't want to save the planet, you don't deserve to live on the planet. Yeah. America's ruling class seems to have adopted the view that the rest of America should be treated as inmates in re-education camps. In the late 1960s, the Frankfurt School of Philosophy had penetrated the campuses, not only of America, but also Western Europe. This is illustrated by the fact that students in the Paris uprising of 1968 marched under the banner Marx, Mao, and Marcuse. You know who Marx and Mao were. Marcuse was a member of the Frankfurt School. The activities of the Frankfurt School, a group of intellectuals which spawned the New Left, the movement that from 1968 onwards captured the cultural hegemony in the West, can be linked to the story of the Sorcerer's Apprentice. Well, I'll save the Sorcerer's Apprentice to some other day. We're just about there, Jose. What do we got? 1 minute left to go? Yeah, so just to wrap this up, this is thick, this is heavy. It doesn't give you a warm feeling in the tummy, but it's something that we all need to be aware of, because it's here. It's in the mainland in spades. And it, as I've mentioned before, it has its foothold here on Guam. Every Monday at right after the halftime show, I run a pretty good video that shows you what you can expect as we get farther and farther down the road towards critical race theory. He's a white man. He's nothing but a colonizer, a murderer. He should get off this island. He has no rights on this island. That's what it's all about. Yeah. So, you know, you may think, well, yeah, it's just one kind of goony lady. What has that got to do with me? But it's just like my examples of what we thought we knew, we were absolutely sure of before the year 2000, that has just been completely changed as those termites started chewing away on the buildings till now we know that America is a horrible country. You know, if only they could bring back the Soviet Union so perhaps we could have the American Soviet Socialist Republic and be governed from Moscow. That's the only thing that could save us. That's where we are, folks. I hate to say it, but it's, you know, here we specialize on reality, not the narrative. And that's why I end the show every day by saying, let's go, Brandon.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Russian attacks continue. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Airstrikes pounding Ukrainian cities.
Russian forces once again targeting civilians in hard-hit Mariupol in the south. A theater where hundreds of people were sheltering was destroyed by what Mariupol officials call a Russian airstrike. President Zelensky of Ukraine says he is heartbroken by what the Russians are doing to the people of his country.
Fox's Jonathan Hunt in Lviv. President Zelensky spoke to both houses of Congress via video hookup yesterday, but the end of his speech was aimed directly at President Biden.
I wish you to be the leader of the world. Being the leader of the world means to be the leader of peace.
President Zelensky again asked for a humanitarian no-fly zone over his country. The answer from the White House, still no.
How President Biden makes decisions is through the prism of our own national security. And as we've said before, a no-fly zone would require implementation. It would require us potentially shooting down Russian planes, NATO shooting down Russian planes, and we are not interested in getting into World War III.
Press Secretary Jen Psaki, British military intelligence says Ukrainian resistance remains staunch and well coordinated, and the vast majority of Ukrainian territory, including all major cities, remains in Ukrainian hands. Ireland's Prime Minister Michael Martin in the U.S. for a scheduled St. Patrick's Day meeting at the White House will isolate instead after testing positive for COVID-19. Actor Jussie Smollett has been freed from jail while he appeals his 5 felony convictions for a faked hate crime. He'd already paid a fine and done community service. His attorney, Nenye Uche, says that's double jeopardy.
I wondered to myself whether Chicago has seceded from the Union. Because in this country, you cannot punish a person